The Christmas I wasn't wanted. Dad, we don't have room for you this Christmas. My daughter said it 4 days before Christmas, and I still remember exactly where I was standing when I heard those words. I was in my kitchen in Denver, holding a cup of coffee and staring through the window at snow piling up along the street. At first, I honestly thought I'd heard her wrong. Then I heard her husband, Michael, in the background. He says it's too complicated. Too complicated. After 37 years of being Sarah's father, I had somehow become the complicated part of Christmas. I was 62 years old. Her father, the man who had been there for her entire life. I could have argued. I could have reminded her of everything I'd done for her. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Okay, sweetheart, Merry Christmas." Then I hung up. But before we get deeper into this story, if you haven't subscribed to Chronicles of Vengeance yet, this is the perfect time to do it, because what happens next is where this story really begins. And trust me, you won't want to miss what Robert discovers. My name is Robert Hayes, and for most of my life, I believed being a good father meant showing up when your family needed you. I spent decades working as a civil engineer in Denver. My job taught me to be patient, pay attention to details, and solve problems without panicking when things got complicated. I wasn't wealthy, but I was stable. When Sarah needed help with college, I found a way. When she got married, I stood beside her. And when she became a mother herself, I thought my role was simple: be there whenever she needed me. I never imagined that one day, being there would become the very thing she wanted me to stop doing. After Sarah married Michael, something changed. At first, it was subtle. Michael started making little comments about how I was old-fashioned. He'd interrupt me during conversations, dismiss my opinions, and sometimes Sarah would quietly ask me not to make things awkward. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Then came Thanksgiving. Michael was talking politics at the dinner table when he suddenly said, "Sometimes parents need to stop interfering in their adult children's lives." I looked at him. "I agree," I said calmly. "But there's a difference between interfering and caring." The room went quiet. Michael leaned back in his chair. "You always have something to say about Sarah." I looked at my daughter. She didn't defend me. On the drive home, Sarah called, "Dad, please don't challenge Michael like that." I wasn't challenging him. "You don't understand. He thinks you're trying to control my life." That sentence stayed with me. I had spent 37 years trying to protect my daughter. Now her husband had convinced her that my concern was control. A few weeks later came the Christmas call. And on Christmas Eve, instead of sitting at Sarah's table, I found myself alone at a downtown steakhouse. Family surrounded me. Couples laughed. Children ran between tables while Christmas music played softly overhead. I ordered a steak and a glass of wine, but I could barely taste either one. I kept staring at the empty chair across from me. Then a gray-haired man approached my table. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "My wife and I notice you're alone. We've got an empty seat at our table. If you like some company, you're welcome to join us." His wife smiled from a few feet behind him. "We lost one of our seats this year," she explained. "Our son couldn't make it home. We figured an empty chair shouldn't have to stay empty." For some reason, those words hit me harder than they should have. An empty chair shouldn't have to stay empty. I looked at my untouched dinner. Then I looked at them. "All right," I said. "I'd like that." The man's name was Harold Gibson. His wife was Margaret. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know where they lived, what they did for a living, or why two complete strangers would invite a lonely man into their Christmas dinner. But I accepted their invitation. And that decision would quietly change the next 7 years of my life. Because for the first time that Christmas, I realized something I had never understood before. An empty chair didn't always mean you had been forgotten. Sometimes it meant you were about to discover where you truly belonged. I just didn't know yet how important Harold and Margaret would become. And I certainly didn't know that 7 years later, Sarah would come back into my life. By then, I wouldn't be the same father who had stood alone in that kitchen. And Sarah wouldn't be the same daughter who had told me there was no room for me. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Sarah that made my stomach drop. "Dad, please don't tell Michael I contacted you. I need to talk to you alone." I stared at those words for nearly a minute. Because suddenly, I wasn't wondering why my daughter had shut me out. I was wondering what she was so afraid her husband would find out. And whatever Sarah was about to tell me would make that Christmas rejection look like the beginning of something much bigger. The strangers who made room for me. I read Sarah's message 3 times before I answered. Sure, when the typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her reply came. Not today. I'll call you after Michael leaves for work. I stared at the screen. That wasn't like Sarah. She had never been afraid to talk to me before. Even when we disagreed, she had always been direct. Now she was texting like someone might be looking over her shoulder. I wanted to call her immediately. Instead, I put my phone down. For once, I decided not to chase an answer. That afternoon, I drove to Harold and Margaret Gibson's house. I'd only known them for one evening, but their invitation had stayed with me. When Margaret opened the door, her face lit up. Robert, come on in. I held up a bakery box. I brought something. She peeked inside. Cookies. A peace offering. She laughed. Sweetheart, you were invited. You don't need a peace offering. That sentence hit me harder than she could have known. You were invited, not tolerated, not accommodated. Invited. Harold came in from the living room, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. There he is, our Christmas Eve recruit. I smiled. Is that what I am now? Absolutely, he said. Once Margaret feeds you, you're practically family. We spent the afternoon talking. Harold had been a high school principal before retiring. Margaret had worked as a nurse and later taught nursing students. Their children lived in different states, which explained the empty chair at their Christmas dinner. They asked about Sarah. I told them the basics. When I finished, Harold didn't tell me what I should have done differently. He simply nodded. That hurts. 3 words. No judgment. No lecture. Just understanding. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Before I left, Margaret said, Come for Sunday dinner. I don't want to impose. You won't. She pointed toward Harold. He's boring enough without company. Harold looked offended. 43 years of marriage, and this is what I get. Margaret smiled. 43 years, and you're still lucky I keep you. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had since Sarah's phone call. The following Sunday, I went back. Then I went again. But it wasn't some overnight transformation. Some Sundays, I barely talked. Other Sundays, I stayed for hours. I helped Harold repair things around the house. Margaret put me to work in her garden. Their grandchildren, Emma and Marcus, slowly stopped treating me like a guest and started treating me like someone who belonged there. Robert, look at this. Robert, can you help me? Robert, you have to see what I made. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed being useful without having to earn my place. But Sarah's silence never completely disappeared. Her calls became shorter, then less frequent, then almost non-existent. And Ethan disappeared from my life along with her. I used to get pictures of him playing baseball or showing off something he'd built at school. Those stopped. His birthday came. I mailed him a gift. A week later, Sarah sent a short text. Thanks, Dad. Nothing else. I sat there staring at those 2 words. I wanted to ask how Ethan was doing. I wanted to ask if I could see him. But I already knew what the answer would probably be. Michael didn't want me around, and Sarah wasn't willing to fight him. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Still, I refused to spend every day waiting for a phone call. I started volunteering at a community center, teaching older adults how to use computers and smartphones. My engineering background helped me solve problems patiently, but I discovered something else there. People weren't coming to me because I had to be their father. They came because they trusted me. That difference mattered. I also started taking short weekend trips, walking more, and saying yes when friends invited me somewhere. My life was slowly becoming bigger than the empty space Sarah had left behind. Then, 14 months after that first Christmas Eve, I arrived at the Gibson house and found Margaret standing alone in the kitchen. She was stirring soup, but tears were running down her cheeks. Margaret. She quickly wiped her face. I'm okay. No, you're not. She put the spoon down. My sister died this morning. I pulled out a chair. She sat across from me. Then she told me they'd been estranged for 11 years. An argument over their mother's estate had turned ugly. Both sisters had said things they regretted. Margaret had tried to reach out more than once, but every attempt ended in silence. Then, 3 weeks before her sister died, there had been a missed phone call. Margaret never returned it. "I thought I'd call her the next day," she whispered. Her eyes filled again. There was always going to be a next day. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me. "That's the lie we tell ourselves, Robert." I felt a knot forming in my chest. "Whatever is happening with Sarah," she continued, "don't let pride make the decision for you. I've tried. I know. She doesn't want me around." "Then don't force yourself into her life," Margaret said. "But don't close the door so tightly that she can never find her way back." Her words stayed with me. That night, I drove home thinking about Sarah. I almost called her. Almost. But before I could reach for my phone, it rang. Sarah. I stared at her name on the screen. For 2 years, I'd been waiting for that call. Now that it was finally happening, I was afraid to answer. I picked up. "Hello." There was silence. Then I heard her breathing. "Dad." "I'm here." Her voice sounded different. Not angry. Not distant. Scared. "Can we talk?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Michael isn't here." I sat up straighter. Why does that matter? Another silence. Then Sarah whispered, "Because I need to ask you for something, and I don't know how you're going to react." My heart started pounding. After 2 years of silence, my daughter had finally called. But she wasn't calling to say she missed me. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because her life had reached a point where she needed something from the father she had pushed away. And when she finally told me what it was, I would have to make the hardest decision I'd faced since the day she told me there was no room for me at Christmas. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't deciding whether to forgive someone. It's deciding whether helping them will destroy the life you've spent years rebuilding. The call that changed everything. "Dad, I need $60,000. For several seconds, I just listened to the silence on the other end. After 2 years without a real conversation, those were the first words my daughter had chosen to bring me back into her life. Not "I miss you." Not "how have you been." $60,000. "Sarah," I said carefully, "what happened?" "The business is in trouble." Her voice was shaky. "We're behind on payments. Michael says if we can get through the next few months, we'll be okay. But the bank is putting pressure on us." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Is the business actually making money?" "Yes." She answered too quickly. I noticed. "Then why 60,000? She hesitated. "Because we're short right now." "Is that all?" There was another pause. "Dad, I know how this looks." "How does it look?" "Like I'm only calling because I need something." I didn't answer, because she had already said what I was thinking. "I know I don't deserve to call you after everything," she continued, but I didn't know who else to ask. That sentence softened something inside me. Not enough to erase 2 years, but enough to remind me that this was still my daughter. "You could have called me before things got this bad." "I know." "You could have called just to talk." "I know, Dad." Her voice cracked. I was embarrassed. "About what?" "Everything." I waited, but she didn't explain. Instead, she said, "Please." I wouldn't ask if we had another option. I looked toward the window. Snow was beginning to fall again. I thought about the retirement account I'd spent decades building. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't sitting on millions of dollars. I had enough to live comfortably, pay my bills, and enjoy the years ahead without constantly worrying about money. $60,000 was a huge amount to me. Giving it away wouldn't destroy me immediately, but it would change my future. And something about the way Sarah was describing the situation bothered me. What exactly is the money for? Business expenses. Which ones? Dad, I need to know before I even consider it. She sighed. Some old debts, a supplier, a loan, things like that. Who gave you the loan? Silence. Sarah, Michael handled most of it. That answer stayed with me. Does the bank know about all of this? I think so. You think so? Dad, please. I don't want to argue. I'm not arguing. I'm trying to understand what you're asking me to do. She became quiet. Then she said something that made me sit up. The bank isn't the only one pressuring Michael. Who else? I shouldn't have said that. Sarah, I have to go. Wait. Who is pressuring him? She didn't answer. Sarah, please don't ask me about it. Then the call ended. I stared at the phone. That was the moment I realized this wasn't simply about a struggling business. There was something Sarah wasn't telling me, but I wasn't going to force it out of her. Not anymore. For years, I believed that being a good father meant pushing through every wall my daughter built. I'd learned differently. Sometimes love meant stepping back and letting another adult tell you the truth when they were ready. So I called her back once. She didn't answer. I didn't call again. That evening, I drove to Harold and Margaret's house. Harold opened the door before I even knocked twice. You look like you've been carrying a truck on your back. Feels about right. Margaret was sitting in the living room with a blanket over her legs. She looked at me. What happened? I told them. When I finished, Harold leaned back in his chair. You're thinking about giving her the money. And now? I don't know. Margaret shook her head gently. Robert, helping your daughter isn't wrong. I know. But giving someone money you don't understand isn't necessarily helping them. That was exactly what I'd been thinking. I offered to look at the business numbers. I said. She wouldn't let me. Harold's expression changed slightly. That tells you something. I don't know what. Neither do I. And I appreciated that. He didn't pretend to have answers. He simply reminded me that uncertainty was sometimes better than a false explanation. The next morning, Sarah called again. Dad, I'm here. I talked to Michael, and he says we don't need your advice. I felt the sting of those words. But I wasn't offering advice to him, I said. I was trying to help you. I know. Her voice was softer this time. I'm sorry. For a moment, I thought she might finally explain everything. Instead, she said, Can you just give us the money? I closed my eyes. No. Silence. Then she whispered, Why? Because I love you. She gave a bitter laugh. That doesn't sound like love. Maybe not today. I continued before she could interrupt. But love isn't handing over $60,000 because I'm afraid you'll stop speaking to me if I say no. She was crying now. You've changed. Yes. That answer surprised both of us. I had to. What does that mean? It means I finally learned that I can love someone without abandoning myself. She didn't respond. I waited. Finally, she said, I need some time. Take all the time you need. Dad. Yes. I don't hate you. My throat tightened. I don't hate you either. The call ended. I sat there for a long time. I had refused my daughter. And somehow, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pushing her away. I felt like I was leaving a door open, but refusing to crawl through on my hands and knees just to prove I loved her. That decision changed me. I stopped waiting for Sarah to decide whether I was worthy of being her father. I started building a life that didn't depend on her approval. My work had already taught me patience. Harold and Margaret taught me something more important. A life can be rebuilt, not instantly, not perfectly, one small decision at a time. Sunday dinners became a tradition. I helped Harold repair things around the house. I spent afternoons volunteering at the community center. I traveled when I wanted to. I learned to enjoy quiet mornings without interpreting silence as rejection. And slowly, the man Sarah had pushed away began disappearing. Someone stronger took his place. Someone who could still love his daughter, but no longer needed her permission to feel valuable. I didn't know it then, but that lesson would matter more than anything else. Because the next time Sarah came looking for me, she wouldn't be asking for $60,000. She wouldn't even be asking for forgiveness. She would be asking me to do something that could change all of our lives. And by then, I had become the one person she could no longer manipulate with guilt. The life I built without her. After I refused Sarah's request for $60,000, I expected her to disappear again. This time, I didn't chase her. I didn't call. I didn't send another message. I simply kept living. Sunday dinners at the Gibson house became a regular part of my life. Harold and I worked on little projects around the house, while Margaret somehow managed to turn every meal into an event. Their grandchildren, Emma and Marcus, eventually stopped treating me like a guest. I became the guy they called when they needed help with a science project, a chess game, or something they couldn't figure out. At the community center, I started teaching seniors how to use computers and smartphones. One woman finally managed to video call her grandson after nearly a year apart. She started crying. I smiled and told her, "Now you know how to find him." Driving home that afternoon, I realized something. For years, I'd measured my worth by what I could provide for Sarah. Now I was learning that I could still matter without being someone's father, bank account, or emergency contact. But there was one person I couldn't stop thinking about. Ethan, my grandson. I continued sending him birthday gifts, even though I rarely heard anything back. One year, I mailed him a model airplane because he'd once told me he wanted to become a pilot. 2 weeks later, the package came back. There was a note attached. "Please stop sending things." I stared at it. The handwriting wasn't Ethan's. I knew that much, and for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I didn't want to have. Maybe someone had been deciding what my grandson was allowed to know about me. I put the airplane away. I didn't throw it out. I just stopped asking questions I knew nobody wanted to answer. The years passed. Not quickly, not painlessly, but they passed. I retired completely from engineering and spent more time volunteering. I took a few trips. I made friends. I built routines that didn't include waiting for Sarah to call. I didn't wake up one morning suddenly happy. It happened slowly, one quiet morning at a time. By the 5th year, hearing Sarah's name didn't immediately ruin my day. By the 6th, I had stopped checking her social media altogether. And by the 7th year, I thought I had finally made peace with the life I had. Then, one spring morning, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. "Hello." Silence. Then I heard a voice I hadn't heard properly in years. "Dad." My entire body went still. "Sarah?" "Yes." She sounded exhausted. Not angry. Not defensive. Scared. "Can we talk?" "Of course. I know I don't have a right to call you. You don't need permission to call your father." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I found something." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Documents." "What kind of documents?" "Business records." "Michael's?" "Yes." I sat down. What do they have to do with me? I don't know everything yet. That answer bothered me. "Sarah, if you're in trouble, tell me." "I am." "Is Michael there?" "No." "Where is he?" "I don't know." I stood up. "What do you mean?" "I left." The words hit me harder than I expected. "You left Michael?" "Yes." "Where's Ethan?" "With me." I closed my eyes. For 7 years, I'd wondered whether I'd ever hear those words. My grandson was with her, and now my daughter was calling me. But something in her voice told me this wasn't a simple reconciliation. "What happened?" "I found 3 documents." "You said that. One is a loan agreement." "Okay. Another is a personal guarantee." I felt a chill run through me. "Whose guarantee?" She hesitated. "Yours." I stopped breathing for a second. "My what?" "Your name is on it, Dad." "That isn't possible." "I thought so, too." "Have you seen the original?" "Yes." "Are you sure it's my name?" "It's your full name." I walked to the kitchen counter and gripped it. "Sarah, I've never signed a guarantee for Michael." "I know." "How much?" She didn't answer immediately. That's the part one didn't understand. "What?" "The amount on this document isn't $60,000. My heart started pounding. "Then how much?" She whispered the number. I felt the room go strangely quiet. It was an amount large enough to change everything. "Where did you find this?" "In Michael's office." "And the $60,000 you asked me for?" She went silent. That silence told me enough to know the two things were connected somehow. "Sarah, I think it was." "You think it was what?" "I think the $60,000 wasn't the whole problem." I sat down. For the first time since she had called me asking for money, I understood why she'd sounded so frightened. She hadn't simply discovered that Michael's business was struggling. She had discovered paperwork connecting my name, her husband's debts, and the financial crisis she'd asked me to solve. And she still didn't know the whole story. "Neither did I. Dad," she whispered, "I need to show you the documents." "Come tomorrow." "I will." There was a long pause. "Are you angry with me?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said honestly. She didn't argue. "I understand. But I'm also worried about you." She started crying. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to figure out tonight." "Dad." "Yes." "I should have believed you 7 years ago." I closed my eyes. That sentence was the one I'd spent 7 years wishing to hear. But now that it had finally arrived, it didn't magically erase anything. "I wish you had too," I said. We ended the call. I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the phone. For 7 years, I believed Michael's greatest victory was convincing Sarah to push me out her life. Now, I wondered if that had only been the beginning. Because if my name really appeared on a financial guarantee I'd never signed, then the $60,000 Sarah had asked me for wasn't simply about saving her husband's business. Someone had been putting my name on something behind my back. And tomorrow, Sarah was bringing me the evidence. For the first time in 7 years, my daughter was coming back to my house. Not because she needed my money, but because she needed me to help uncover what Michael had been hiding. The signature that wasn't mine. Sarah arrived the next afternoon, just after 2. I watched her car pull into my driveway and felt an old mixture of emotions I hadn't experienced in years. Anger, hope, fear, and something I didn't want to admit, relief. She got out slowly, carrying a thick manila folder against her chest. When she reached my door, she stood there for a moment before knocking. I opened it. "Hi, Dad." "Come in." Neither of us hugged. Not yet. She followed me into the kitchen and placed the folder on the table. I brought everything I found. I sat across from her. "Show me." Sarah opened the folder. The first document was a business loan agreement with Michael's company name printed across the top. I scanned the first page. Then I saw it. Robert Hayes. My name. Below it was a signature. I stared at it for several seconds. Sarah watched my face. "Is that yours?" "No." She let out a breath. "I was hoping you'd say that." I picked up the document again. The signature looked convincing, but I knew it wasn't mine. I'd spent decades signing engineering contracts, property documents, permits, checks, and legal paperwork. I knew the small habits of my own handwriting. "The slant is wrong," I said. Sarah leaned closer. "What?" My signature normally leans slightly forward. This one is almost straight. I trace the printed copy with my finger and look at the last 2 letters. I connect them. Whoever wrote this separated them. Sarah stared at it. "So someone copied your signature?" "Someone tried to." She swallowed. "There are 2 more." She placed another document in front of me, a personal guarantee. Again, my name. Again, a signature that looked close enough to fool someone who didn't know mine. But the pressure was wrong. The final stroke was too heavy. I looked at the date. My stomach tightened. "This was signed 8 months before you called me asking for the $60,000. Sarah nodded. "I know." "Did Michael already know about this debt?" "I think he did." "Then why did you ask me for $60,000? Her eyes dropped. "Because I believed him." The honesty in her voice made me pause. "I told myself you had changed," she continued. "I told myself Michael was right about you being controlling. I let myself believe that asking you for money was somehow your responsibility." She wiped her eyes. "I was wrong, Dad, but I was also stubborn. I don't want to pretend I was just some helpless victim." I didn't respond, because she was right. Michael may have influenced her, but she had still made the choices. She had ignored my calls. She had kept Ethan away. She had told me not to contact her. And she called me after years of silence because she needed money. "I can't erase what happened," I said quietly. "I know, but I'm listening now." She nodded. Then she pulled out a bank statement. "These payments bothered me." I looked down. Several transfers had been made from Michael's company account to another business. What is this company? I don't know. When did these payments start? Before the business supposedly went into trouble. I studied the dates. The pattern was clear. Money had been leaving the company months before Michael told Sarah they were struggling. Then I noticed something else. Sarah, what? Look at this payment. She leaned over. The transfer description included an address. My old address. I felt the room change. That was my house. Sarah nodded. I know. I sold that property 7 years ago. And for a lot of money, she said quietly. I looked at her. I bought the house when Sarah was young and sold it after moving into my current place. The sale had given me enough money to strengthen my retirement savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant. How did Michael get this information? I don't know. She pulled another document from a folder. It was a property record. My old address, my name, and a reference number connected to a financial agreement. I stared at it. This property was sold 7 years ago. Exactly when she gave me the date. I knew it immediately. It was only a few weeks before Sarah stopped returning my calls. My chest tightened. Sarah, did Michael know about the sale? I think so. Did you tell him? No. Then how did he know? She didn't answer, because neither of us had an answer. I turned the page. There was another transaction. The amount was much larger than the $60,000 Sarah had asked me for, and beside it was a reference connected to the same financial institution listed on the forged guarantee. I looked at Sarah. Where did you find this? Michael's private files. Does he know you have these? I don't think so. Are you sure? She hesitated. No. That answer worried me more than anything else she'd said. I closed the folder. Sarah, why did you really leave Michael? She looked toward the window. Because I realized he wasn't just lying about the business. What was he lying about? I don't know yet. Then what do you know? She looked back at me. I know he didn't want you asking questions. That's not enough. I know. And her voice dropped. I found emails where he talked about keeping you away from me. My heart sank. Why? I don't know. She reached into the folder one last time. This was attached to one of the emails. She placed a photocopy in front of me. It was an old financial document. My name was there. My property address was there. And underneath both was a handwritten note. Only 6 words. Keep Robert out until it's done. I read it twice, then a third time. For 7 years, I believed Michael simply didn't like me. I believed he convinced my daughter that I was difficult, controlling, and selfish. But now I understood something much darker. Someone had been using my name, my property records, and my financial history, while I was busy believing my daughter simply didn't want me anymore. I looked at Sarah. What does until it's done mean? I don't know, but we're going to find out. She nodded, and for the first time since she'd walked through my door, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't fear. It was determination. But neither of us knew yet that the answer was sitting inside a document I had signed years earlier, a document I had completely forgotten existed. The debt they hid from me. The next morning, Sarah was waiting outside my house before 8. She looked exhausted. I hadn't slept much either. Neither of us could stop thinking about the same 6 words. Keep Robert out until it's done. Sarah stepped inside and placed a small envelope on my kitchen table. I found one more thing. Where, in an old storage box from Michael's office, my name was written across the front. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photocopy of an agreement I'd signed nearly 8 years earlier. I stared at the signature. This one was mine. Sarah noticed my expression. What is it? I remember this. You do? Barely. I read the document again. Years earlier, Michael had asked me to review some paperwork related to expanding his business. He'd told me he needed someone with my experience to look over a few financial documents. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table. I remembered signing several pages. And I remember Michael saying, "It's just paperwork, Robert. Nothing that puts you at risk." I had believed him. That realization hurt more than I expected. I kept reading. Then I saw two words that made my stomach tighten. Collateral verification. Below them was the address of my old house. That property was used as collateral, I said. Sarah's eyes widened. But you sold that house 7 years ago. She grabbed the document. Dad, look at this. A section near the bottom showed that the original debt had later been transferred to another company. I read it twice. The debt didn't disappear, I said. What do you mean? It was moved into another company. I pointed at the document. And whoever controlled that company now controlled the obligation tied to my old property. Sarah looked confused. But if you sold the house, how could they still use it? That depends on what they did with the paperwork. She went quiet. We began searching through the old records. Then Sarah suddenly froze. I found the company. Who owns it? She turned her laptop toward me. The company was controlled by Michael's business partner. My pulse quickened. How much was the original obligation? Sarah scrolled down. Then she looked at me. Dad, what? $480,000. I stared at the screen. $480,000. The number explained something I had never understood. The $60,000 Sarah had asked me for wasn't the whole crisis. It was a fraction of it. Michael told you the business only needed $60,000. Yes, but the debt connected to my property was $480,000. She nodded slowly. I didn't know about this. I believe you. She looked down. But I still have to admit something. What? I helped him. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what he was doing, she continued. But I believed him. I believed every time he said you were controlling. Every time he told me you were trying to interfere in our marriage. And when he told me to stop answering your calls. Her voice broke. I listened. She wiped her eyes. I can't blame everything on Michael, Dad. I made those choices too. That was the first time I'd heard her say it. And strangely, it meant more to me than an apology would have. You hurt me, Sarah. I know. For 7 years. I know. And I don't know if I can ever forget that. I don't expect you to. She took a breath. But I want to make it right. Before I could answer, Sarah opened another file. There's something else. It was an email from Michael. The date was 7 years earlier. Only weeks before Sarah stopped speaking to me. The message was short. I read it once. Then again, one sentence stood out. Once Robert is completely out of Sarah's life, there won't be anyone asking questions. I leaned back. Sarah covered her mouth. Oh my God. I looked at her. This wasn't about him disliking me. She shook her head. He was afraid you'd discover something. Exactly. Then Sarah whispered something that changed the way I looked at the entire situation. Dad, what? I don't think Michael was the one who designed all of this. I stared at her. Why would you say that? Because of the company. What about it? Michael's partner doesn't actually control it. I felt a chill run through me. Then who does? Sarah opened another record. There was a corporate name at the top. Beneath it was the name of a holding company. And beneath that was another company. Layer after layer. A structure designed to make the real owner difficult to find. I looked at Sarah. Who was behind it? I don't know. Before we could search further, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message appeared. Stop looking. Sarah stared at it. Then another message arrived. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I slowly placed the phone on the table. Michael had threatened me before, but this felt different. Because whoever had sent that message knew exactly what we had found. And whoever was hiding behind those companies had a reason to be afraid. For 7 years, I had believed Michael was the man who destroyed my relationship with my daughter. Now I understood something much more disturbing. Michael may have only been the man standing between me and someone far more powerful. And if that was true, the question wasn't just what Michael had done to me. It was who had been waiting for him to do it. The man behind Michael. The attorney spread the documents across his desk. The $480,000 loan. The guarantee carrying my forged signature. The records from my old property. And the company that had received the money. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he circled one name. Robert, this is a company you need to look at. I leaned closer. Northbridge Development Partners. My stomach tightened. I know that name. The attorney looked at me. You should. He pulled another document from the folder. This company tried to buy your property 7 years ago. And suddenly, I remembered. A developer had approached me about my old land shortly before Sarah and Michael began pushing me out of their lives. They had offered me a price I considered unfair. I refused. At the time, I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The attorney turned the page. The executive who handled that proposal was Richard Coleman. I stared at the photograph attached to the file. Richard Coleman. I remembered him immediately, but there was something else. Something that made the room feel colder. Why would Richard Coleman care about my property? The attorney pointed to the financial records. Because the property was worth considerably more than the offer you received. He explained that Northbridge had planned a larger development project. My land wasn't valuable because of what it was worth that year. It was valuable because of what it could become once neighboring parcels were acquired. And Michael had discovered that. According to the records, Michael had been promised $150,000 plus a percentage of the development profits if he helped secure the property. My hands tightened. So he needed me gone. More specifically, the attorney said, he needed you isolated from your daughter. Everything suddenly connected. The Christmas rejection. Michael convincing Sarah that I was controlling. The years of silence. The $60,000 request. The mysterious loan. My old property. The forged guarantee. Michael hadn't simply wanted my money. He wanted my property. And Sarah had unknowingly helped him by believing every lie he told her. Sarah looked down at the floor. I should have listened to you, Dad. Her voice broke. I stopped your calls. I kept Ethan away from you. I even believed you were trying to control my life. She wiped her eyes. I can't undo 7 years. No, I said quietly. You can't. She looked at me, expecting anger, but I wasn't angry anymore. Not the way I had been 7 years earlier, because now I finally understood something. Michael hadn't stolen 7 years from me. He had stolen them from Sarah and Ethan, too, and I wasn't going to let him steal another day. The attorney closed the folder. We have enough evidence to start unraveling this. I looked at Sarah, then at the documents. 7 years ago, my daughter had told me there was no room for me in her home. Now, for the first time, I understood what had really been happening behind that closed door, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I wasn't going to destroy Michael. I was going to make sure the truth destroyed everything he had built on my name. The door was never really closed. The truth didn't explode overnight. It unfolded slowly. The attorney challenged a $480,000 guarantee, and the bank opened a formal review of the documents. Investigators examined the property records, recovered emails, and traced payments between Michael and Northbridge Development Partners. Then they discovered what Northbridge had actually been planning. The company had been assembling several properties surrounding my old land for a much larger development project. My property was a missing piece, and Michael had known exactly how valuable it was. The attorney showed me one final email. Michael had written to Richard Coleman. Once Robert's out of the picture, Sarah will handle the rest. I read it twice. Then I understood everything. Michael hadn't pushed me away because he simply disliked me. He had promised Coleman he could keep me isolated long enough for their financing structure to close. The Christmas rejection, the years of silence, the $60,000 request, the forged guarantee, the use of my property as collateral. It had all served the same purpose. Keep Robert away long enough to take control of what he owns. But they had made one mistake. They assumed I would never look closely enough. Richard Coleman was forced to answer questions about the financing structure and his communications with Michael. Northbridge's planned transaction was halted, and the partnership behind the deal began to unravel. Michael's business financing was terminated. The partnership dissolved, and the financial guarantees he had relied upon became the subject of legal disputes. For the first time, Michael had nowhere to hide behind Sarah. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. 7 years was a long time to lose. A few weeks later, Sarah sat across from me at my kitchen table. The same kitchen where I had once eaten Christmas dinner alone. "Dad," she said quietly. I looked at her. I know saying sorry doesn't fix 7 years. No, I said. It doesn't. She lowered her eyes. I stopped your calls. I kept Ethan away from you. I believed Michael when he told me you were trying to control my life. Her voice cracked. I made those choices too. That mattered to me, because I didn't need Sarah to pretend she had been completely innocent. I needed her to understand what she had done. I can't give you those 7 years back, she whispered. No, I said, but if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life earning back your trust. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached across the table. Not because everything was forgotten, not because the pain had disappeared, but because forgiveness isn't pretending someone didn't hurt you. Sometimes, forgiveness means deciding they won't control your future anymore. A few weeks later, Ethan came to visit. He was older now, different, but when he stepped through my front door, I saw the little boy who used to run into my arms. Grandpa! I smiled. Hey, kid. He hugged me, and something inside me finally broke loose. Not anger, not resentment, just 7 years of sadness I had carried quietly. That Christmas, I set the table. There were more chairs than we needed. Sarah noticed. Dad, why so many? I looked at the empty chairs. Because I've learned something. What? You never know who might need a place to sit. She smiled through her tears. 7 years earlier, my daughter had told me there wasn't room for me at her Christmas table. I thought those words meant I had lost my family. I was wrong. I hadn't lost my family. I had discovered what family was supposed to feel like. People who don't make you earn a place at the table. People who don't use love as leverage. People who don't close the door when you need them most. And most importantly, people who eventually have the courage to open that door again. Sarah pulled out the chair beside her. Dad, she whispered, this one's yours. I sat down, and after 7 years of wondering where I belonged, I finally knew I was home